Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're looking at part 2 of episode 5 of the Rebel Eaters Club, Pleasure is Power with Shay Neary. So without further ado, let's just jump into it.
Anything that doesn't fit within the white line stream of what is supposed to be and what isn't is going to be considered fetish, which is why there's such a huge amount of sex work and pornography, because people have desires that they're not actively willing to push.
For a lot of people in American society, there is an unspoken rule that some relationships are meant to be public and some are meant to be private. There are the relationships that are acceptable, that don't shake things up. Often it's relationships with thin people, white people, cisgender people, able-bodied people. We learn those are safe to make public. Then there are relationships that we are told to hide. People that we're supposed to feel ashamed about desiring, about accepting even. We're told that we should not desire to be close to people who are fat, people of color, people who are trans or gender expansive, people who are disabled, people who do sex work. In our culture, we're taught that having desire for these kinds of people is taboo or deviant. So they are fetishized.
I don't know. Mixed race couples are fairly normal now, aren't they? I mean, I think I could see how in certain parts of the US where more unfriendly to people of color, I could see how that would be a bigger issue. I think it kind of, I don't know, I think this is a wide brush to paint a very diverse, because if she's talking about culture, she's most likely talking about US culture. So if we're just looking at the US, that's a pretty broad brush to paint the entire US. It kind of depends on where you live. I'm not saying that this doesn't have some truth to it, but I live in a northern state, and it's like I've never thought twice about these types of couples. Like, it just was not something that really crossed my mind. It's something that the general. So just a quick aside, there's a couple, I've heard some people that have traveled to the south that it's a very like friendly social atmosphere, more so than in the northern states where everyone just kind of keeps to themselves mostly. And so I think there's a little bit of a difference in culture in the south where there's this sense of, yeah, there's a hospitality, like the southern hospitality, and the general friendliness also tends to open the window for them to kind of judge you and your business. As to where, at least in northern states, at least from my experience, I can't say for everyone, but this is my experience. In the northern states, people tend to keep more to themselves, and so to a certain extent, it's kind of like a stay in your lane situation, and it's none of your business what other people are doing. So no one really thinks twice about it. That's not to say that there aren't. I mean, there's Karens everywhere, and this ignores some. Like, there's more to the U.S. than just northern states and southern states. There's a variety of cultures even within those spaces, so it could very well be differentiated there. I'm just saying from my experience, I think this is a pretty broad brush to paint the entire U.S. with. It's a big country. It's a little too generalized for me.
They are stripped of their full humanity and reduced to a source of sexual release or pleasure. All that, total poop garbage. People are capable of finding beauty, sexiness, appeal in all kinds of bodies and personalities. That is normal. It's natural, and burying that desire, that's what's harmful to ourselves, to the people we love, and to our culture.
Like, we're all turned on by something. My key question always is like what gets you hot? If you're not seeing something or facilitating a relationship with something that doesn't get you hot, you may want to check why it's not going to work out in a year or two. Like,
right.
Because you're trying to befit the cookie cutter, and not everybody fits in a cookie cutter, honey. Some people are a bundt cake. Some people are a freaking Italian loaf. They're not all cookie cutters.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, some bitches are pumpernickel. Get you a slice. Like,
yes, pumpernickel, yes. Yes, I mean, I think you're getting at, I mean, to me, right, I think for a lot of people, they believe that attraction and desire are things that we're born with, right? They're innate, they're perhaps evolutionary. At the end of the day, though, most attraction is socially constructed. We learn who to be attracted to by our culture. We get the thumbs up when we're doing the right thing. We get the thumbs down when we're doing the wrong thing. We get
Ooh, I don't like that. I don't like the idea that who you're attracted to. Don't get me wrong, there is some influence of general cultures, like what the big beauty standard is at the time, what's in trend at the time. Like right now, slim thick is a pretty big thing, so we're seeing more girls, and that's considered beautiful. But in the 90s, it was like rail thin. So there is like that level, but even with those, there's plenty of people that go like against what's considered pretty right now. Everyone still kind of has a preference. I don't think, and I know she said most preferences, so I think she's kind of carving out a space of like LGBT to kind of say that, you know, most but not all. But I think that's still too overgeneralized. I think that, to be honest, this is not an area of expertise for me because I don't really experience sexual attraction. I just don't like the idea of people saying that sexual preferences is largely made up of societal norms. I can see how societal norms and societal beauty standards have an influence. They have an influence. But I don't think to say that your preference is largely made up of what society tells you. I think that creates a dangerous ground for it to be over generalized into the LGBT community, and we know that you can't change being gay, you can't change being bi, you can't change being pan, I can't change being asexual. So I don't like I don't like that narrative just on its face as a whole. Don't get me wrong, with certain body types, maybe certain key features or something, I could see how that could be, preferences could be influenced, but I think it's more subtle and not a direct, every sort of person that doesn't fit this linear mold that society has deemed the beauty expectation for this decade solely controls your preferences. I don't like that. I don't like that.
We get the carrot, we get the stick, right? I don't know. I'm just thinking about like how we end up in these situations where people are incentivized to act inauthentically, to not pursue pleasure, to not do things that feel good. And I feel like this is in a big way the big takeaway from this conversation in general. But I kind of want to really dive into the fact that like the culture really fucks us up by telling us that there's something wrong with our desires, and so we end up denying them and repressing them. And I think this goes to this concept, like the metaphor of taste, right? I don't know, like the metaphor of taste reminds me of going to college. For the first time, I was in a white world, in a white affluent world, having grown up in a mostly immigrant suburb of the Bay Area, and all of a sudden I'm at UC Berkeley, and it was a very rapid education in how to perform taste,
Oh yeah,
how
yeah,
to
yeah.
how to and how to perform that through food choices,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I could perform that I was passing, or like I could imagine in my head that I was passing by mimicking the foods of the people that people around me were eating. Obviously, it's so tied up in my own, experience with disordered eating and dieting and stuff like that. But I remember actually developing physical aversions to food that I knew was like food that was quote unquote off limits to me at that time. Like I would literally develop like nausea when I thought about or got close to food that I thought would, lead to like my worst case scenario, which at that time was that I would stay a fat person, or that I would regain some of the weight that I had managed to through some method, through some terrible method to lose.
Our relationship with food and society is so torn. It's like it's just a sensibility that like you're better than someone. You know what I mean? The difference between shopping at Whole Foods or shopping at Stop and Shop, like the difference between shopping at Trader Joe's via shopping at Aldi's, like they're all selling the same exact shit. But it's like we look at people who buy their stuff at cheaper stores as like trashy. You see Food Town on someone's cheddar and you're like, oh, you went to Food Town? Ew. I think food is very.
If you're doing that, then you have entirely too much fucking time on your hands, and this is another case of stay in your own fucking lane and mind your own goddamn motherfucking business. I, I think, so here's the thing. I think that they are projecting things that they've either thought in the past and then realized that that was kind of a shitty thing to think and have kind of adjusted their thought process. I think that they overgeneralize either things that they've experienced from others or how they used to think themselves and just think that everyone thinks that way unless they are enlightened by people like them now. It's so kind of narcissistic and incredibly self-centered to think that you are enlightening. No, I don't think that someone is better for shopping at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. There are things that I specifically go to Trader Joe's for because they're the only place that sells them, like their honey sesame cashews, because they're fucking delicious. But by and large, I don't buy a whole lot of things from Trader Joe's because it's fucking more expensive when I could get something similar at Safeway, Walmart, Fred Meyer, Winco, whatever. Do they live in like California, like the bougie end of California or something? Because not everyone thinks that way. I would say most people probably don't think that way unless they live in a high end area.
Very elitist.
So you know how taste has more than one meaning? Like your literal sense of taste, the part in your mouth when you take a bite of a red velvet cupcake. And it also has a second meaning that's all wrapped up in class, indicating the ability or inability to tell if something is refined. Taste is defined by tastemakers, and in food, for a long time, one of those tastemakers was Gail Green. She was a New York Magazine food critic for more than 30 years. Shay told me when she was young, she wanted to be just like Gail Green.
I went to college to be a food writer. I wanted to make a lifetime writing about food and sex and how those two are so innately the same. And how, like, the control between making a good meal
What? Wait, I'm gonna let her finish.
and the patience to establish a great recipe, between the compromise of making passionate love to your partner or sharing a free moment with a sporadic individual, and how food is so innately combined with that. I wanted to master that.
What in the fuck? Why do they sexualize food so much? Why? I don't like this. I don't like this at all. It's weird. I'm sorry, this is not my most intelligent take on any of this. When they start, there's just so much that's said in this one that hits my ick factor. I don't like this. This is ick. I don't like the sexualizing of food. I don't like this overgeneralization based on either this cartoonish privileged person's perspective, or perhaps it's just their previous perspectives that they're overgeneralizing to everyone because everyone apparently needs to start off as the same shitty viewpoints as they did before they were enlightened. So I don't know, but it just, I don't like this.
That. And then I worked for Red Farm for a while, and the owner was best friends with Gail Green. And I met her in person, and I realized how unlike this woman I was. How, like, I didn't come from a wealthy background. I didn't come from money. I didn't know the difference between great food and good food, or fancy food, like the difference between Per Se and McDonald's. Do you think I gave two damns back then? I didn't. I just loved cooking. I loved enjoying myself with food. You know, I'm Sicilian, so like food is love. I want people to enjoy food for what it is. Like, I don't want them to overabsorb themselves in the nutritional values of food, because in reality, any food you're putting in your mouth is good food.
Right. So you have a special relationship to cereal, if I'm not mistaken.
I do. Yeah, I fangirl for cereal. It's my hard life.
And you've identified cereal as a soothing food for you, and I'm curious about this.
100%, because it's easy. It was easy to get. Like, if my mother had made food that I didn't want, my grandmother would give me a bowl of cereal. Like, she didn't want me to starve.
Yes.
So my grandmother didn't believe my mother. If I didn't want to eat what she put on the table, she would literally send me to my room and without anything. And so like my grandmother would always give me Cheerios or like Frosted Flakes, like a bowl of it. She'd pour me some, and she'd act like she was going in the kitchen for herself, and then she'd end up bringing it to my room. So a lot of like my comfort and joy, I always eat cereal. It's the first thing I did yesterday. I got home and I literally made myself a bowl of shredded Trader Joe's maple, whatever the hell they are, little Crispies.
The frosted.
I know that this is probably a little bit of making something bigger than it is, but I find it interesting that just earlier they were talking about how, you know, there's this weird perspective that if you shop at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, you're somehow better than shopping at Ollie's, and then they kind of backtrack, and then, well, not backtrack, but like counter that point, saying, you know, people need to eat and it's cheaper at some of those other stores. But then they talk about, you know, not just having cereal, but having the Trader Joe's cereal. And so it's like, well, there's just something about the juxtaposition of those two lines that I find interesting, and I can't help but, is that posturing? Given how, like, their previous statement, I don't know. Also, I think that this is another example of old coping mechanisms from childhood being lionized as a way of healing. Like, you were a child, from the sounds of it, from what we've heard from Shane, her childhood was not very secure, not very safe, not very supportive of her. And so, you know, her grandmother bring her a bowl of cereal when she refused to eat the food that her mother made her. Like, maybe I understand how that was helpful at the time, and at least she got something to eat. But there's just this thing of, because this isn't the first time she's mentioned food as a big area of comfort. Her obsession with food does seem to be highly triggered from her childhood. And so that doesn't, just because these were mechanisms that soothed you and comforted you as a child when you were dealing with so much that was out of your control, does not mean that it is the best option for you now. And if anything, if this is their big argument, this just, to me, re-solidifies how the fat acceptance movement is a counterproductive movement that will ultimately lead to more harm to people. I don't think that leaning into coping mechanisms from a neglectful, abusive, or inadequate childhood are the ruler that we should live our lives by.
The mini wheat
Yes,
ones?
the maple ones.
Yes.
Yes, they're so nummy.
Yes. So like cereal is a food that still gives you all these yummy good feelings. It's sort of reminiscent of like this really special caring behavior that your grandmother did for you.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of like, right, like what's the power in being able to give ourselves what we want?
The power in giving us what we want. I don't like I feel like adulthood is like finally making choices for yourself that you actively wanted to make as a child but couldn't. The positivity that's blossomed from my relationship with food is because I don't want to look at it negatively anymore. I don't want to have a negative relationship with food because it doesn't control my life. I control it. So like if I want to have and enjoy a piece of pizza because that's what I want today, that's what I'm going to have. And whether I have to suffer through the thoughts of eating that piece of pizza and what the terms mentally that come along with it, I'm going to try to reshape those mentalities. Like eggplant parmesan is not something I can reshape. You know what I mean? That's a box that's closed. She's not eating that ever. But there are things that I'm kind of reworking, and I think we all can do that within our power. We all have the power to re-foster things mentally for ourselves, and it requires work and effort. And like things like everyone wants things to be easy, and there's nothing easy about your mentality. Not a damn thing. Things don't happen overnight.
Okay, that's absolutely valid, and that's absolutely fair, but I find it interesting how she says people want things to be easy, and yet they don't understand how that also leads into weight loss that they are so vehemently against. Weight loss isn't easy. Weight loss requires a complete mentality change. Weight loss requires you analyzing perhaps negative coping mechanisms you have around food and working to change them. Weight loss means changing your knee-jerk reactions to emotional distress and not channeling it towards food. It's not easy. It requires work. It's easier for some people than it is for others who have less baggage around food. But if you were one that often ate to soothe yourself, especially as a child, if you were one that ate for companionship, if you were one that ate because it was the only thing that you felt like you got in life, then you have to work to reshape that dynamic you have with food. And that can lead to weight loss, and weight loss is not a bad thing.
You have to work on your mental health. You have to work on fostering healthy mental relationships with everything you have. And if you don't do that, you're leaving yourself on the disadvantaged side of the scope. And I have no want or desire to do that. Not anymore, at least.
Shay, you are amazing and wonderful, and you've shared so much.
Sassy lady. Stop it. Are you looking in the mirror when you say those things? Stop it.
Oh, I'm so grateful I got to spend a little bit of time talking with you about your food history
Same.
and your life. And thank you so much. I love how Shay talks about our power to reconstruct and reimagine things that are painful, to turn things that suck into things that work for us. We live in a culture that loves to label things as good or bad, a culture that uses those labels to control our actions and our desires. There's good food and bad food, public relationships and private ones, the right kind of desire and the wrong kind. There's so much pressure to make the socially acceptable choice. When we want something else, we get some pretty strong messages that there's something wrong with us, that we should feel guilty and ashamed. If you're sometimes debilitated by those feelings, you are not alone. Defying all that pressure is especially hard work if you're also dealing with things like classism, trauma, and fat phobia. Well, Rebel friends, I'm here to say that you can go at your own pace, find your own way through it. And I'm here to say that it's work that is worth doing. Standing up for what you want and need is a powerful kind of transformation.
Although, just to be clear, what you want and what you need are two different things. Just because you want Oreos doesn't mean you need Oreos.
For this week's prompt, Shay talked a lot about how food has been a witness to her experience. What foods have been witnesses to your life? Remember, try not to see food you write about as good or bad. Focus on the details of the story and leave room to honor what you've been through. For the past few weeks, I've been closing each episode with a journal prompt and encouraging you to share your stories. And many of you have written and called in. Thank you so much to each of you for sharing your personal experiences with all the diet culture poop garbage. Here are a few of the calls.
Hello, my name is Callie, and I'm calling from Raleigh, North Carolina. My family's food is Doritos and cream cheese. Plain nacho Doritos dipped in just a block of cream cheese. We had this snack at every party, every gathering, every TV night when we watched American Idol together. My family would just devour 2 solid rectangles of cream cheese and like 4 bags of Doritos. So definitely try it, and thank you.
Hi there, Virgie. My name is Jessie, and I'm 25 years old, and I live in a town called Sudbury, and I'm in Canada. My food that I'd like to talk about is mashed potatoes. When I think of mashed potatoes, I think of comfort, I think of home, I think of my mom making my favorite food when I was young, buttery goodness, family. So quickly, unfortunately, it turned into carbs, starch, quote-unquote bad foods. Potatoes, bad. Indulgence, bad. As I worked into my own personal journey with eating disorder recovery, I realized white foods are fine. Now, again, mashed potatoes, revelation, yummy, comfort, buttery, fluffy, versatile, bliss, indulgence in every aspect that I need, want, and desire. Thanks for listening, Virgie. I love your podcast.
Okay, I'm sorry, but that last girl, the one that we were just listening to, seems like she's taken a few too many pages from Virgie's book with her litany of descriptors and then talking about, desire and love. It's weird. It's weird. This just goes to show the bad impact that Virgie has. And I'm sorry, but that Doritos and cream cheese where you and your, how big is your family that you're going through 2 full blocks of cream cheese? I'm not a huge fan of cream cheese. It's okay with certain things, but I don't really get the appeal of the cream cheese itself, but whatever. So 2 blocks of cream cheese and 4 bags of Doritos? 4 bags? How big is your family? How big is your family that you are going through 2 blocks of cream cheese and 4 bags of Doritos? That's a lot. No wonder you have a weight issue. I don't understand how they can talk about this shit and then say it's just impossible for me to lose weight. What? Do you not hear yourself? Do you not hear yourself? And if you really love that, fine, but measure out the amount of cream cheese and get 1 serving of Doritos rather than just mindlessly eating the bag. The bit about mashed potatoes, I don't think mashed potatoes are inherently terrible as a starch or a form of carbs. It's not the best, but it's better than chips, I think. And it's better than French fries, and it's probably better than pasta. Do they not understand the concept of having things in moderation? She's like, I saw it as starch and carbs, and therefore it was bad. And more, it's you don't have to view it as morally bad. You don't have to view it as morally bad. You can eat it in moderation. I don't understand. You don't have to overly associate it with warmth and comfort and family, but you also don't have to cut it out of your life completely. Why are those the only 2 options? We only have 1 more full episode left next week. It's called Food is Life with Soleil Ho. So that should be interesting. And I don't really have a whole lot left to comment on for this episode of Rebel Eaters Club. I've noticed that it's just kind of getting harder because they go over the same shit. It's still very much this over-lionizing of food. But we only have 1 full episode and then 2 mini ones. So we're just going to go ahead and finish out season 1. And then I'll probably stop. Couple of updates over the week. Maintained my weight, still at 184. I've been reading a lot of manga. I read The Masterful Cat is Depressed Again today, and that's really fucking cute. I really enjoyed that. I also started reading The Way of the House Husband, which is fucking hilarious. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned that last week or not, but I've been reading The Way of the House Husband, and it's fucking adorable, and I love it. I'm currently doing my first ever crochet design. I'm designing a crochet pattern myself for the first time. It's a dragon hood. It's a dragon scales hood. So I'm excited to see how that turns out. Nothing really going on the job front, despite the fact that I've applied to several places, but they've just closed, so I'm hoping that I will hear from them. Here's a little tidbit about school districts. They're usually a little frantic and last minute some worse than others. The school district that I currently work for, not as a teacher, but as a teacher's assistant, essentially, they notoriously do things last minute. Like, the school year will probably already be started, and then there will be a slew of postings, because that's the way it is. And then I'm really hoping that if I can't get a position from one of the last few that I applied to, that numbers of enrollment officially come in October, and then usually there's a second wave of postings. So I'm hoping I can get something that way. As a backup, though, I've applied for a completely different position at my local library, which will make me sad if I have to take that, but I need more than the work that I have now. So it's just kind of... It's not that I would dislike the job either. It's a position that I think I would enjoy. It just feels like a step down after going through all the trouble of getting a teaching certification and a master's degree. So I'm really hoping that I can just kind of continue on the road that I wanted towards teaching. I'd be happy to teach at a community college. That would be cool too. I want to be teaching, you know? And I think that's about it. I don't have a whole lot to talk about today, but let me know how you all are doing. I'd love to hear it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.